Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. Welcome back. Hopefully you completed the assignments on Monday and Tuesday about the Declaration of Independence. You should have compared and contrasted the rough draft with the original, and you should have found a pretty big difference, hopefully, in an interesting topic of slavery. I'm looking forward to reading some of your responses. But I'm actually here to talk to you a little bit about slavery today, but not exactly like you would think. I'm again talking to you about documents. There are certain documents we consider important to talk about. One of them just so happens to be this thing called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Now, it's not exciting, and most of it's not worth knowing about. But there are some key aspects that are important to always know about the Northwest Ordinance. So I'm going to give you a quick lecture about the Northwest Ordinance. You're going to answer a quick quiz about this lecture. You should have a paper out. You should be taking notes. And that's it for today. Wednesday should be quick and easy. The quiz is, of course, open note. You should be able to answer them very simply. So, here we go. All right, so obviously the United States declared independence. You read the Declaration of Independence. Obviously, they defeat the British and win the Revolutionary War. What you probably didn't know was that our first government was under a document not named the Constitution, which we'll talk about later, but called the Articles of Confederation. And to summarize a very long story that we'll talk about later, the Articles of Confederation was an absolutely terrible government. That's why they had to make a new one less than 10 years later. But it did one good thing, and one good thing really only, in my mind. Passed the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which stipulated how the area, known as the Northwest Territory, would be settled by future settlers, how they could buy land, and what were some of the laws and restrictions in this new territory. And that's where it gets interesting, because it also stipulates, too, how these territories can become future states. This is the important information. Let's talk now. So, again, one of the purposes of the Northwest Territory was to provide temporary governance as a territory and eventually organize entry into the U.S. as a state. Huzzah! Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, all eventually entered the United States from the original Northwest Territory. So new states are added on an equal footing with original states. The original 13 states are not any more special than here in Ohio. Means no colonization of lands. U.S. had territories, not colonies. But really there's a three-step process to creating a state. And this three-step process is super important and absolutely one of the most important things, if not the most important thing I'm going to tell you about today that you need to know. One is it creates a territorial government. There are three steps to creating a state. One is to create a territorial government like the Territory of Ohio with a governor, judges, and laws. Step two is the territory reaches 5,000 freedmen and elects representatives to create a legislature. All right, legislature being Congress or representatives that vote on new laws. Step three, the territory has 60,000 people, drafts a constitution, and submits it to approval to the United States Congress in Washington, D.C. They like the Constitution, you get to be a state. It's not that hard, it's pretty simple, but always important to know. So this is a map of the original Northwest Territory. As you can see, you can see where all the states I mentioned before: Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and a little itty bitty part of Minnesota. So, the Northwest Ordinance also dealt with other important issues. It required that every settlement ensure that the liberties given to citizens in the 13 states be extended to all others. Again, connecting it right back to the Declaration that government should provide a certain amount of liberties and life and freedom for its citizens. Now, many of the provisions in the Northwest Ordinance would later be included in the Bill of Rights. We're going to talk about the Bill of Rights later, and what the Bill of Rights is. It's a part of our Constitution. But some of these principles are: it declared that all territories could enter the Union as equal states with the same status and privileges as the original 13. It guaranteed voting rights to every adult male who owned 50 acres of land. Obviously, you don't have to own 50 acres of land or be just a male these days to vote. But at the time, having a right to vote guaranteed to some people was a big deal. Schools were encouraged as a means of education. I don't want to say this is the beginning of public school in America, but it's certainly a very good start. One section of each township was reserved for a school. So on the incorporation of a town, said town would also have a school. National aid was given for the education of said schools. Other basic rights, religious liberty. This was especially important to Thomas Jefferson, who, by the way, also had a hand in the passage and creation of the Northwest Ordinance. But religious liberty, meaning, you can worship how you want, who you want, when you want, where you want, does not matter. Trial by jury, meaning you can be tried by, a group of 6 to 12 people who will decide if you're innocent or guilty. And a writ of habeas corpus, which is a fancy Latin word for you are entitled to a trial by court. Long story short. Slavery. Slavery was prohibited in the Northwest Territory. It was outlawed outright. You could not own slaves in any of the new territories, Ohio or Michigan or Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, or Wisconsin. And this was a big deal. One, it ensured that the states that would later form the North and fight as a part of the Civil War had no slaves. But two, it would actually set a precedent for the government to have a right to restrict, interfere, or maybe even prohibit and abolish the practice of slavery, which was a big deal at the time. No state created could have slavery. Also, Indian Affairs stated that new land should not be taken from Indians without their consent. Settlers were forbidden to unjustly harm Indians. We didn't really listen to this part of the Northwest Ordinance. We still very much pushed Indians off their land and fought them on numerous occasions. So here you can see another map of the Northwest Ordinance. And that concludes our small lecture on the Northwest Ordinance. I've told you all the things you absolutely have to know. It's not too much. I wanted to take it pretty easy for you here on Wednesday, since Monday and Tuesday was some hefty stuff. Go ahead and take the quick quiz on the Northwest Ordinance when you're done taking notes today. And have a great rest of your Wednesday.